Ever heard about the African queen who totally humiliated a colonial governor? No? Well, stick around, it's a wild story you're never gonna forget. Hi guys, welcome back to this channel. In today's video, I'll be talking about the African queen that humiliated a colonial governor, so stay tuned. Nzinga was born into the royal family of Nzinga Mbande Kingdom in central West Africa around 1583. She was the daughter of Angola, a noble Quilombo of Nzinga. Her mother, Kengola, was one of her father's slave wives and his favorite concubine. According to legend, the birthing process was very difficult for her mother, Kengola. Nzinga received her name because the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. Children of the royal household who survived difficult or unusual births were believed to possess spiritual gifts. Some saw their births as an indicator the person would grow to become a powerful and proud person. When she was 10 years old, her father became the king of Nzinga. As a child, Nzinga was greatly favored by her father. Since she was not considered an heir to the throne, she was not seen as direct competition to male members of the family, and so the king could freely lavish attention upon her without offending his more likely heirs. She received military training and was trained as a warrior to fight alongside her father, displaying considerable aptitude with a battle axe, the traditional weapon of Nzingan warriors. She participated in many official and governance duties alongside her father, including legal councils, war councils, and important rituals. Furthermore, Nzinga was taught by visiting Portuguese missionaries to read and write in Portuguese during this period. The Kingdom of Nzinga was managing multiple crises, largely due to conflicts with the Portuguese Empire. The Portuguese had first come to Nzinga in 1575, when they established a trading post in Luanda. With the help of the Kingdom of Congo, Nzinga's northern rival. Despite several years of initial peace between Nzinga and Portugal, relations soured between the two kingdoms and devolved into decades of war between them. By the 1580s, large parts of Nzinga had fallen under Portuguese control. The Portuguese waged war in a brutal style, burning villages and taking hostages. In addition to territorial conquests, the Portuguese seized large numbers of slaves during the conflict and built forts inside Nzingan territory to control the slave trade. Nzinga rallied against the Portuguese, defeating Portugal at the Battle of Lucala in 1590, but not before the kingdom had lost much of its territory. The conflict eroded the power of the king, with many Nzingan noblemen, sobas, refusing to pay tribute to the crown, and some siding with the Portuguese. By the time that Nzinga's father became king in 1593, the region had been devastated by war, and the power of the king greatly diminished. The king tried a variety of methods to handle the crisis, including diplomacy, negotiations, and open warfare, but he was unable to improve the situation. The situation grew worse for Nzinga when in 1607 the kingdom was invaded by the Mbangala, tribal bands of warriors known for their ferocity in battle and religious fervor. The Mbangala divided themselves into war bands, occupying Nzingan territory and capturing slaves. The Portuguese hired some of the Mbangalans as mercenaries, and the new threat forced the Nzingan king to give up any attempts to reconquer his lost territory. In 1617, the king died, and Nzinga Mbande, his son, came to power. Upon assuming the throne, he engaged in months of political bloodletting, killing many rival claimants to the throne. Having consolidated his power, Mbande vowed to continue the war against the Portuguese. However, he lacked military skill, and while he was able to form an alliance with the Mbangala, the Portuguese made significant military gains. Faced with the Portuguese threat, in 1621 he contacted Nzinga, asking her to be his emissary to the Portuguese in Luanda. She was the best fit for the job, as she was both of royal lineage and spoke fluent Portuguese. She agreed to lead the diplomatic mission with the stipulation that she be granted the authority to negotiate in the king's name and permission to be baptized, an important diplomatic tool she hoped to use against the Portuguese. The Portuguese, however, refused to accept her as a legitimate ruler because she was a woman. While Nzinga leaders typically met the Portuguese in European clothing, she chose to wear opulent traditional clothing, including feathers and jewels of the Nzingan people, to display that their culture was not inferior. Despite this snub, Nzinga remained defiant and continued to resist the Portuguese encroachments. He awaited Nzinga's arrival in Luanda, his face impassive, betraying none of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. According to a popular story, when Nzinga arrived to meet with the Portuguese, there were chairs for the Portuguese officials, but only a mat provided for her. This type of behavior from the Portuguese was common. It was their way of displaying a subordinate status, a status reserved for conquered Africans. The humiliation started subtly, but it was clear. Governor João Correia de Sousa wanted to send a message. As Nzinga entered the room, her eyes locked onto the chair, understanding dawning on her face. The governor's message was clear. He considered her beneath him, fit only to stand before him. But Nzinga was no ordinary monarch. Her eyes narrowed, calculating, plotting a response that would turn the tables, a response that would etch this moment into infamy. While everyone waited, holding their breath, Nzinga made a gesture, subtle yet commanding. An attendant instantly dropped to his knees, forming a living throne, his back a canvas for the intricate designs meant for a chair. Nzinga then did the unthinkable. She walked up to the kneeling man, her gaze unwavering, and sat majestically on his back. But the humiliation was far from over. Nzinga turned, her eyes meeting the governor's directly, refusing to look away. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the pounding of hearts. Finally, Nzinga broke the silence, her voice echoing with quiet authority. "So, this is the seat which thou thinkest fit for me," she declared, her words dripping with sarcasm. "Then so be it." This was no mere diplomatic visit. It was a psychological duel, and Nzinga had delivered a knockout blow. She had asserted her dominance, making the governor's grand gesture a humiliating spectacle. This tale isn't just about a chair or a throne. It's about the clash between two worlds, a clash between a colonial power drunk on its perceived superiority and a queen determined to uphold her dignity. It's a story of psychological warfare, where the mightiest weapon is not a sword, but one's own self-respect. When the news reached Europe, it caused quite a stir. The Portuguese chroniclers, eager to paint a picture of their empire's glory, minimized the incident, dismissing it as a cultural difference. As ambassador, Nzinga's main goal was to secure peace between her people and the Portuguese. To this end, she promised the Portuguese an end to hostilities, allowed Portuguese slave traders inside Ndongo, and offered to return escaped Portuguese slaves fighting in her brother's army. In return, she demanded that Portugal remove the forts built inside Ndongo territory, and was adamant that Ndongo would not pay tribute to Portugal, noting that only conquered peoples paid tribute and her people had not been defeated. When the Portuguese questioned her commitment to peace, Nzinga offered to be publicly baptized, which she was with great aplomb in Luanda. She adopted the name Dona Ana de Sousa in honor of her godparents, Ana da Silva and Governor João Correia de Sousa. A peace treaty was subsequently agreed upon, and Nzinga returned to Kibasa in triumph in late 1622. Despite her success in the negotiations with the Portuguese, the peace between Ndongo and the Mbangala themselves engaged in expanding their territory collapsed. In 1624, her brother died of mysterious causes before his death. He had made it clear that Nzinga should be his successor. Nzinga quickly moved to consolidate her rule, having her supporters seize the ritual objects associated with the monarchy and eliminating her opponents at court. She also assumed the title of Angola, conferring a position of great influence among her people. However, her ascension to the throne faced severe opposition from male claimants from other noble families. According to Mbande tradition, neither Nzinga nor her predecessor brother had a direct right to the throne, because they were children of slave wives, not the first wife. While the succession crisis deepened, relations between Ndongo and Portugal became more complex. Nzinga hoped to fulfill the treaty she had signed with the Portuguese in 1621, and thereby regain Ndongan lands lost during her brother's disastrous wars. Facing a Portuguese invasion, Nzinga gathered her army and withdrew to a group of islands in the Kwanza River. After a series of battles, she was defeated and forced to make a long march into eastern Ndongo. During the retreat, she was forced to abandon most of her followers, a strategy that greatly benefited her, as the Portuguese were more interested in recapturing slaves than in pursuing her army. In November 1627, Nzinga again attempted to negotiate with the Portuguese, sending a peace delegation and a gift of 400 slaves. She indicated that she was willing to become a vassal of the Kingdom of Portugal and pay tribute if they supported her claim to the throne, but was adamant that she was the rightful heir to the throne of Ndongo. The Portuguese, however, rejected the offer, beheading her lead diplomat and issuing the counter-demand that she retire from public life. She suffered a series of military defeats, most notably in a Portuguese ambush that saw half of her army, most of her officials, and her two sisters captured, though she herself was able to escape. By late 1628, Nzinga's army had been greatly reduced, and she had been effectively expelled from her kingdom. Following her expulsion, Nzinga and her supporters continued to fight against the Portuguese. To bolster her forces, the Queen looked to make allies in the region, while keeping her battered forces out of reach of the Portuguese army. Using her new power base, Nzinga remodeled her forces after the highly effective Mbangala warriors. By 1631 she had rebuilt her army and was waging a successful guerrilla war against the Portuguese, with one Jesuit priest describing her as being akin to an Amazon queen and praising her leadership with Matumba under her control. Over the next decade, Nzinga continued to struggle against the Portuguese and their allies, with both sides attempting to limit each other's influence and take control over the slave trade. During this decade, Nzinga took on more masculine traits, adopting male titles and clothing. She established an all-female bodyguard for herself, and ordered that her male concubines wear women's clothing and address her as king. Can you believe that? She also instituted communal sleeping quarters at her court, and enforced strict chastity rules for her male counselors and female bodyguards. By the late 1630s, Nzinga had expanded her influence to the north and south of Matumba. Using her forces, she cut other rulers off from the Portuguese-controlled coast. She continued to occasionally send peace overtures to the Portuguese, even suggesting a military alliance with them, but only if they supported her return to Ndongo. She also refused to be readmitted to the Christian faith, which became a point of contention between the two parties. Using the large size of her army, her new wealth and her famous reputation, Nzinga was able to reclaim large parts of Ndongo from 1641 to 1644. However, her expansionism caused alarm amongst other African kingdoms. In one infamous incident, she invaded the Wandu region of Congo, which had been in revolt against the Congolese king. Though these lands had never been part of Ndongo, Nzinga refused to withdraw and added the conquest to her kingdom, an act which greatly offended the Congolese king, Garcia. In 1644, Nzinga defeated the Portuguese army at the Battle of Angolim. Then, in 1646, she was defeated by the Portuguese at the Battle of Kavanga, and in the process, her sister Kambu was recaptured, along with her archives, which revealed her alliance with Congo. These archives also showed that her captive sister, Fungi, had been in secret correspondence with Nzinga and had revealed coveted Portuguese plans to her. As a result of the woman's spying, the Portuguese reputedly drowned the sister in the Kwanza River. Despite these successes, the Allies' control over Angola remained tenuous. Lacking artillery, Nzinga was unable to effectively break the Portuguese defences at Masangano, while political infighting and developments in Europe weakened the Dutch forces in Angola. In August 1648, a Portuguese expedition, led by newly appointed Governor Salvador Correia de Sá, besieged Luanda. After suffering through a major Portuguese bombardment, on the 24th of August 1648, the Dutch commander sued for peace with the Portuguese and agreed to evacuate Angola. When Nzinga's army and the remaining Dutch forces arrived outside Luanda, the peace between Dutch and Portuguese was signed, and unbeknownst to Nzinga, the Dutch forces sailed for Europe after the wars with Portugal ended. Nzinga attempted to rebuild her kingdom. Nzinga's final years were spent establishing a unified kingdom she could pass on to her sister. Peace caused major changes at Nzinga's royal court, whereas in wartime she had adopted the masculine dress and mannerisms of an Mbangala warlord. In the post-war era, Nzinga's court became more feminine. She adopted new fashions in court, imported silk and goods from Europe, placed renewed focus on education. During the 1660s, specifically after a period of serious illness in 1657, Nzinga grew increasingly concerned about who would succeed her as ruler of Ndongo and Matumba. She feared that her death would lead to a succession crisis, which would cause her Christian conversions to be undone and spark renewed Portuguese aggression. To ensure the transition would be smooth, she appointed her sister Kambu as her heir, foregoing any of the traditional Mbundu elections. In October 1663, Nzinga fell ill with infection in her throat and became bedridden. By December of that year, the infection had spread to her lungs, and Nzinga died in her sleep on the morning of the 17th of December. She was buried with great aplomb in accordance with Catholic and Bantu traditions. Ceremonies were held across Matumba and in Luanda, where both the Portuguese and Bantu populations held services in her honor. Following Nzinga's death, her sister, Kambu, more commonly known as Barbara or Dona Barbara, assumed the throne. A powerful queen who reigned for over 30 years, Nzinga has been the subject of many works. The Portuguese, Nzinga's longtime rivals, wrote a number of works relating to her life. The first biography of Nzinga was published by Antonio da Guita, a Capuchin priest who had lived in her court in 1669. Gaeta's work praised Nzinga's diplomatic skills and compared her to famous women from antiquity, but also pointedly noted that she had ultimately been persuaded by divine providence to accept Christianity. Today, she is remembered in Angola as the mother of Angola, the fighter of negotiations, and the protector of her people. She is still honored throughout Africa as a remarkable leader and woman, for her political and diplomatic acumen, as well as her brilliant military tactics. Accounts of her life are often romanticized, and she is considered a symbol of the fight against oppression. The years that followed were a testament to Nzinga's tenacity. She fortified Matumba, turning it into a fortress that baffled the Portuguese. Decades rolled by, each year etching new chapters in Nzinga's saga. As the sun set on Nzinga's extraordinary life, the story of the chair continued to resonate. It echoed in the bustling markets of Ndongo, the rolling plains of Matumba, and in the whispered tales of generations past, and in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a world without subjugation. By confronting this uncomfortable truth, we unravel the very fabric of narratives that have shaped our world. We risk dismantling the foundations of an age-old system that thrives on perpetuating inequality. The erasure of such stories allows the cycle of oppression to continue unabated, fostering a distorted reality where imbalance becomes the norm. By neglecting to acknowledge the bravery of those like Queen Nzinga, we inadvertently endorse the status quo, allowing narratives of marginalization to go unchecked. We inadvertently perpetuate a cycle of ignorance that allows prejudice and discrimination to flourish. As we continue our journey to uncover the hidden narratives of Africa's past, we must confront the painful reality of this erasure head-on. We need to ask uncomfortable questions, challenge long-held beliefs, and confront the biases that have shaped our understanding of history. Only then can we begin to dismantle the structures that perpetuate inequality and rewrite a more inclusive narrative that celebrates the diversity of human experience. It is time to break free from the shackles of imposed amnesia and embrace the uncomfortable truths that have been deliberately erased. It is time to reclaim the narratives of those who dared to defy the status quo and fight for equality, justice, and freedom. It is time to honor the legacy of trailblazers like Queen Nzinga and ensure that their stories are not forgotten but celebrated. Let's move beyond passive acceptance and become active participants in reshaping the narrative. Let's engage in thoughtful discussions, challenge conventional perspectives, and demand a more inclusive portrayal of history. Let us support initiatives that bring these untold stories to light and amplify the voices that have been marginalized for far too long. The erasure of African narratives has left us with a fragmented and distorted view of our shared history. But we have the power to change that. A future where inclusion, equality, and respect are not just words, but lived realities. The stories of our past are not just tales of bygone eras. They are threads that weave together the fabric of our identity, shaping who we are and inspiring who we aspire to be. By preserving and celebrating these stories, we honor the struggles, achievements, and resilience of our ancestors. And in doing so, we empower ourselves to create a better future. Let us strive to challenge our own biases and work towards creating a more inclusive and equitable world for all. If you liked this video, you might also enjoy another video on a similar topic. Click here to watch that video now. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel to be part of our community of curious learners. Thank you for joining us on this educational adventure. Keep asking questions, keep seeking knowledge, and keep exploring the fascinating world around us. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.